But there's this other one, and this new article, Hollywood Hitmen, Black Helicopters, Underground Bases, Laser Weapons, and the Mysterious Death of Schwarzenegger's Screenwriter, from the September 2010 issue of 40 in Times. And we've got a link to that article. It's in 40 in Times number 266. And it's about this guy named Gary Devore, who is a screenwriter, and apparently he interacted with was frequently interacting with I guess Hollywood's CIA liaison, and was on the verge of producing a film based on a script of his dealing with the invasion of Panama. And for those of you who aren't familiar with all the shenanigans surrounding Panama, I mean, the first thing you got to question is, why was it necessary to use the American military to go after a drug launderer, especially one that all the evidence points to was working for us? And it was a crazy situation. Mm-hmm. There's shades of the Day 51, shades of the Waco standoff when he sought refuge in a church, and the church was assaulted with a lot of the same kind of
the Vatican
noise
embassy,
technology, the harassment noise technology that the Davidians were subjected to. But what most people don't know is that there were reports of some of the most exotic weaponry being tested against not just the Panamanian military forces when we invaded, but civilians that were caught in the crossfire. And these stories actually mimic some of the stories we would hear decades later in the last 10 years related to the Gulf Wars and the use of advanced, perhaps chemical lasers and whatnot. But this article, which you can read over at 40 in Times, goes into some detail about this fellow who mysteriously disappeared one night. He had a penchant for driving late at night as a way of working through his scripts, and so he was an old hand at driving long routes and with very little in the way of modern lighting out in the desert and so forth. And that's enough to make most people go, well, he could easily run off the road and die or something. But this particular story is a little more mysterious than that, and the body was eventually found in I believe like a gravel pit filled with water, where allegedly the wife of this individual had hired a PI, a private investigator, and they had looked there with sensors and found nothing. And then later on, that's where his body is discovered in his car, and under all the circumstances really seem to point to shenanigans, like the things he would have had to have done to have ended up accidentally in that pool of water.
And all of his research and the earlier drafts of this film he was making disappeared after he was killed. But
there's a couple more details we'll tell you about on the other side, but this is the end of the first hour. And we've been talking tonight about the influence of Hollywood and how it's used both as a propaganda tool and how the people in its midst are often compromised and manipulated.
And sometimes murdered.
For money. This article over at 40 in Times, Hollywood Hitmen, Black Helicopters, Underground Bases, Laser Weapons, and the Mysterious Death of Schwarzenegger's Screenwriter, is about, as we were saying, Gary Devore, who died mysteriously. His body was found in his car in underwater in a water-filled gravel pit on a lone offshoot of a road out in the desert. And he had just been on the phone with his wife earlier that evening. Everything seemed more or less normal, but he was really excited about his new project he was working on, which had to do with the invasion of Panama, and apparently touched on a number of different areas, not least of which was drug trafficking, but also exotic weaponry, as we have heard, was used against the Panamanian military and civilians in the invasion of that country. And there were some very strange things surrounding this case, not least of which was that apparently the reservoir had been searched previously after he'd already disappeared, and then that's where his body is found. Sans hands. He didn't. His hands were not on his body. They were there. Some hands were found in the back. Some bones of hands were found in like the back seat of the submerged vehicle.
That's strange.
And there's even some suspicion that those might not have even been his hands.
It's like finding another head on the Oswald body when it was dug up. You know.
Now, this fellow was married to a number. He was married to a woman named Wendy, who I think was his wife at the time. But he had also been married to Claudia Christian, if I'm getting the name right. She's the actress that several folks will probably remember from movies like The Hidden and the television series Babylon 5. And she, among other things, makes a suggestion, and she's not the only person, that maybe perhaps Gary Devore himself may have had some kind of spook background. But the fact remains that it appears that he was, just trying to do a very poignant, progressive film exposing possible shenanigans on the part of the U.S. military in its invasion of Panama, and appears to have maybe been offed. And I mentioned earlier that he was friends and in communication with, I believe, the CIA Hollywood liaison, whom one of the wives, I think Wendy, talks about having caught him messing with her dead husband's computer. When he was over at the house one time. So it's got all the elements of a spooky.
It would be a good movie itself, wouldn't it?
Yeah, movie. And it's by this author I've been reading and promoting, Matthew Alford, author of Real Power: Hollywood Cinema and American Supremacy. And as I said, we've covered his articles before in past episodes of PsyOp Radio, dealing with the military's involvement in the film industry. And so far the book really delves into just how much even films that seem to be quote unquote anti-war or questioning of the government aren't. All right, we'll be right back for the second hour of PsyOp Radio.